40. Through the Earth. A blockade? Emilia echoed. This caravan was bringing aid to a region struck by what amounted to a natural disaster. Who would restrict travel at a time like this? She, Terran, and Venye made their way through the narrow corridor that ran the length of the linked cars. A raiding clan? Suggested Terran, as he held the next compartment door open and the two women slipped under his arm. This far inland? Emilia asked. Terran shrugged. I don't know. Patram Solis said there were reports of raids before communications went dark. Perhaps it's a larger incursion. Raiders may pose a concern to individual clusters, but are by no means organized enough to gather in force. They are too divided by clan politics, Venye said, with a wave of her hand. They pushed into the final cabin before the pilot cab and paused. Anything else I should know? Terran shot Emilia a look before answering. Clearly, the Elder needed a crash course on what concerned those living in these mercurial lands. Several clusters in the outer reaches had their trade cut off even before the Earthbound trouble began. Raiders or not, the people here have been hard-pressed these last months. Maybe some have taken matters into their own hands. I see, Venye said. Unease rattled through Emilia, a sickening weight settling in her stomach. A darker picture than farmers revolting filled her thoughts. What of the communication failures? What if someone is trying to destabilize the area? We know messages were actively being intercepted to keep the capital in the dark. Terran stepped next to her, nodding. Someone went to great lengths to keep word getting through to the capital. This could be the culmination of their plans. Venye pressed her lips into a tight line. I suppose we will know one way or another soon enough. Terran, prepare the overseers. No matter who these vagrants are, it is time to remind them who holds the authority of the sky. A knot of worry lodged beneath Emilia's sternum. Terran no longer had his strength, but Venye clearly assumed he did. Yes, Elder, he said with a short bow. Venye disappeared inside the pilot cab, and Emilia fell into step next to Terran as they retreated back the way they had just come. You didn't tell Venye you are not an overseer anymore, Emilia noted. Terran slowed his steps and dropped his voice. My conversation with her last night was strange. I got the sense she wanted my loyalty or wanted me out of the way. But she told me how to help you, Emilia said. Did she tell you I needed to relinquish our bond or any bond? Emilia frowned. Our bond? She said we would need your strength and that letting you go was the only way you'd survive. Terran rubbed at the corner of his mouth and was silent for a moment. She as much as confessed to stirring up dissent in the Order. I think she spoke of her treason to push me to the point of fracturing. She wouldn't. Venye is one of the few who have genuinely cared about us, about Nox. It was our bond tearing you apart. Emilia's voice hitched. I never should have told you about the Book of Oaths, or pushed you to share your secrets. Terran stopped in the narrow hall and stared at her, slack-jawed. You believe it was your fault? Emilia wilted under his gaze, guilt and shame making her want to disappear. When you didn't want me to come to the Reaches, Venye told me you were oath-torn. I wanted to help, but it just kept getting worse. A huffed breath escaped his lips, and he ran a hand through his hair, looking at the ceiling. I was oath-torn because Darius made me extend my primary oath to him personally, not because of a failure on your part. He brought his eyes back to hers. I was suspicious of Venye after your first conversation with her, and worried that because of my oath to Darius, if you got too close to Venye, I wouldn't be able to separate my vows and keep you safe. Silence descended over the hall as they both digested the implications. Our bond didn't break you? Emilia finally asked. Terran's brow arched, and a smirk pulled at his mouth. Not technically. A strange mix of relief and sorrow swirled through her. I'm sorry if I hurt you, Terran. His expression turned serious, and amber eyes locked on hers. The golden pools stirred a warmth she'd thought banished with their broken bond. "For you, I'll break as many times as you need." His voice dropped low with the statement, and his throat bobbed as he swallowed. Emilia's breath stuttered in her chest at the words. His mouth quirked. "But maybe we wait a day or two before we put that to the test." Surprised laughter spilled from her, and Taran joined with a chuckle. The tender moment passed, and they focused back on the matter at hand. "Do we trust Venier to negotiate this blockade?" Emilia asked. He rolled his shoulders as if trying to shake off memories. "Venier may have been willing to see me fractured, but I think she's working for the good of the Mercurial. We need to be cautious, though. Like Darius, she's willing to sacrifice whatever is needed to see it done. I am committed to seeing this through, but I'm done being a pawn in their shadow war." Emilia pulled in a cleansing breath. She'd hoped for this, for Taran to belong to himself once again. At what cost? The unspoken question stabbed. They continued down the hall, and Emilia studied him. Long, confident strides, easy breath moving through his chest, broad shoulders relaxed. He appeared in control, undeterred that he was about to face a blockade without his power. She pushed the worry aside. If he trusted himself, then she would too. The scout craft came to a stop at the northern edge of the barricade, as instructed. In the front, Elder Venier sat next to Overseer Connor, who was driving, while the other two overseers, Hayden and Merrill, stood in the open box with hands on the roll bar, long poles at their sides. Emilia volunteered to join the team as a specialist and keep an eye out for unknown tech and help if they needed her. She and Taran sat along the edge of the box, watching the barricade grow as they neared. Massive, felled trees formed the bulk of the barrier across the route, blocking any line of sight to what lay beyond. Thick forests on either side of the road created the perfect funnel. "How do we get through?" she asked. "A single message came through, but we were unable to respond. We were told to wait for the way to open," Venier said. Taran's scowl deepened at the words, and Emilia resisted the urge to thread her arm through his. Before they had left the capital, he'd trimmed his beard short. Amber eyes bright, broad shoulders pulled back, he looked every inch an overseer. The power of the sky incarnate. And yet he's himself, and nothing more. Without warning, the earth around them began to roil like a bubbling pot. She screamed, and Taran gripped her hand. The hovercraft floated over the changed earth, and Connor looked to Venier. She held her hand up. "Wait a moment. Only the Earthbound can move the earth like this," Emilia whispered to Taran. "What are we waiting for?" Taran edged closer to her, but didn't look panicked. He watched the earth move around them with narrowed eyes. "Look," he pointed at the boundary of the liquefaction. Emilia schooled her emotions and followed his line of sight. Unlike the chaos caused by the monstrous Earthbound that had attacked Rickon, this liquefaction was different. It was not moving in organic, fluidic lines, but instead within the straight-lined bounds of a large rectangle. As they watched, the boundary lines began to drop, and the whole craft was lowered into a perfectly symmetrical impression in the ground. Hayden and Merrill readied themselves to jump, tipped longpoles at their sides. A section of earth in front of them fell away, revealing a tunnel running beneath the barricade. The liquefaction moved no further than to level itself with the tunnel, and stopped. Emilia couldn't believe what she had witnessed. This sort of technology was unheard of. Scientists and engineers had spent veritable lifetimes trying to learn the secret of how earthbound creatures changed solid matter to behave as a fluid. Someone, it seemed, had cracked the code and was putting on a masterclass on applications. "This shouldn't be possible, should it?" Taran asked. She shook her head. Venier signaled Connor to drive forward. She looked calm, but Emilia didn't miss the tension in the older woman's jaw. The tunnel was not long, and the light ahead called them forward. Emilia felt herself tense, holding her breath. People of the sky did not enter the earth. Not willingly, she thought, images of Nox that day on the field setting her heart racing. A sloped ramp led from the tunnel, and they all blinked, eyes readjusting as they moved back out under the open sky. She let out a shuddering breath and looked around. They were in a foreign world. Domed structures filled the clear-cut area, and impressive-looking hovercraft ringed the camp with high-powered probes extending into the ground. "Timoshian raiders," Venier said, stunned. "A group this large? I don't like this," Hayden said. Emilia squeezed Terran's hand. Being surrounded by the enemy was hardly a satisfying way to be proven right. Venier's expression turned hard as Connor navigated through the camp toward the largest of the domed structures. "What are those?" Terran asked, pointing toward the heavy craft at the boundaries. Emilia looked closer. Thick probes were pressed into the earth, almost up to their hilt under each vehicle. The ground around each craft was fluid, though the probes were unlikely to be responsible for the change. There had been no visible probes when they came under the barricade. This crackling blue energy obviously served some other purpose. Venier glanced toward Emilia. "Any ideas, dear?" "All I can think is to keep the Earthbound out," she guessed. "You had a similar plan in Ricken. Could they have used your schematics?" Terran asked, his eyes never leaving the crackling line of vehicles. "No, this is refined technology. I never figured out how to power them on this sort of scale. Not to mention we were going to dig the probes into the ground. I don't know how they're creating liquefactions." "Observe as much as you can," Venier said, strain obvious in her voice. "If we cannot broker a deal here, we may need to engineer similar tech." "Yes, Elder." The craft came to a halt before the largest of the domed tents. Rows of armed Tumultians stood on parade with a formidable woman standing front and center before them. "They are not just clan raiders," breathed Terran. "It's a full scuttling army." "The communication blackouts," Emilia said. "They've been jamming us." Terran's eyes darkened. "A quiet invasion." "Sky help us," Merrill whispered, and shared a look with Hayden. He muttered a curse, not taking his eyes from the lines of troops. "No instigating any violence," Venier instructed, tendons in her neck taut. "But be ready. Tumultians are as changing as the land they hail from." A shiver ran through Emilia. Elder Venier, too, was clearly unsettled. The overseers shifted and gripped weapons tighter, but otherwise stood firm. Bless their endless hours of training. Connor powered down their craft, and the Tumultian leader stepped forward. "Welcome, Elder Venier and overseers," she greeted. The calculating way she sized each of them up emphasized they were expected and known. Her eyes lingered over Terran, her lip twisting up into a sneer-like smile. Connor helped Venier from the hovercraft. "Whom do I have the pleasure of meeting?" the Elder asked, clearly irritated by the Tumultians' casual leveraging of their identities. "Tensa Quinmark, First Commander of the Tumultian Force." Merrill and Hayden shifted, expressions hard, watching Terran to see if they were to be loosed. Even Connor, the youngest of the team, glanced Terran's way, unsure. They were in the heart of an enemy camp and ready. Terran held up a hand. "Hold." Venier dipped her head in a restrained nod of respect. "Commander Quinmark." "If you follow me," the commander said, gesturing to the large tent. "I have been given authority to speak on behalf of Lord General Sarge." She cast a quick glance over the rest of the small group. "If one of your overseers prefers to stay here with your craft, they will remain unharassed." Venier nodded at Connor. His face dropped at the prospect of being left behind, but Terran squeezed his shoulder as he passed him. "Stay alert. If they move against you in the slightest way, unleash the sky." He perked up at the words and gave Terran the fisted salute. He pulled his long pole free and adopted a grim expression as he moved to the head of the craft, on guard, with eyes forward. The commander led the group into the largest of the domed tents. Emilia had expected one large, cavernous type of room, but instead it felt as if she was walking into a home. Large, yes, with the high ceiling, but warm, with fabric, rugs, and numerous heavy-looking screens dividing the space. Many of them were painted with impressively detailed murals, adding to the bright, colorful nature of the room. Long tables filled with fresh fruits and prepared foods were arranged in what looked like a central gathering hall. Soldiers were posted along the exterior walls, but others moved through the room or stood talking in small groups. All stilled as they entered. The commander gestured at the food and the lounging area. "Overseers, make yourself comfortable. I assure you the food is suitable for your needs." She smirked at their surprised expressions. "We are well prepared for holding your kind." "Is that a threat?" Terran growled, edging closer to Elder Venier. The sentries with the commander flinched at Terran's movements and put hands to odd weapons at their hips. They looked like the bolt-throwing weapons she had seen in Rickon. Tapered, handled devices that released bolts of energy when wielded correctly. These, though, had thicker handles than she had seen before, and the gathering filaments were braided into intricate knots at the tip. It was no small leap to guess these weapons would pack a much more serious punch. She swallowed the anxiety climbing her throat at Terran's bluff. He had no power to back up his bravado. Commander Quinmark's eyes narrowed, and a thin smile stretched her lips. "My apologies. Of course not holding, Overseer. I misspoke. Hosting. We are here to negotiate a treaty, not start a war." Emilia stopped mid-stride. She turned to Terran and found his shock mirroring her own. Merrill's longpole came up, and Hayden dropped his stance, ready to attack. Terran reacted similarly, with clenched fists and body primed, ready to strike. Venier stepped in front of him. She looked at their team one by one, eyes hard and full of unspoken meaning, until each of them relaxed. The overseers returned to watchful postures. Terran caught Emilia's eye and gave her a reassuring look. The gesture felt woefully impotent considering what was unfolding. Treaty with the Timoshians? While not always at odds, they were peoples of different matter. "Lead on, Commander," Venier said. The commander lifted a golden eyebrow at Venier, but then nodded slowly and pointed to a screened-off room. "Right in here, Elder." Terran moved to follow, Emilia a step behind. 2 Timoshian guards intercepted them, shifting their bodies to block the path. "We go where the Elder goes," he said, his voice low and obviously restrained. Merrill and Hayden shifted to flank Terran with similar expressions. Emilia felt as if she stood in the eye of a storm, fury all around her. The commander spoke a soft order to her men, and they lowered their hands from the weapons at their sides. "These are peaceful dogs, and guards are not needed, particularly not divinely gifted ones." Venier pursed her lips. "You want me to give up my protection while you have guards filling this space?" The commander gave a long-suffering sigh. "One of your overseers could decimate my entire camp. Do not feign weakness, Elder. Negotiations would go smoother if neither of us were under threat of death." "Would you allow guards who were not overseers?" Terran spoke up. Emilia's heart squeezed, anticipating where this was going. Commander Quinmark made a show of considering the request. "It would delay talks to bring others over from your caravan." Venier did not look particularly eager at the suggestion either. "There won't be a delay," Terran said, with an all-too-casual air. "Our specialist and I are not overseers. We'd be happy to serve as witnesses." The commander's expression darkened. Venier spun on Emilia and Terran, stunned. Emilia couldn't help but inwardly exult in the elder's moment of shock, and bit back a huff of amusement at Terran's impish smirk. Venier turned back to the commander, expression still blank. Quinmark tipped her chin in a silent command to one of the sentries. He turned and left his post, only to return a few moments later holding a silver rod the length of his forearm. It had a brushed steel finish, but beyond that, Emilia could see nothing of interest about the rod. He handed it to Terran with a poorly disguised grin and returned to his post. The commander watched Terran closely for the span of several heartbeats before her mouth twitched into a frown. "Interesting," she looked at Emilia. "Now the woman." Emilia reached out and took the baton, keeping her face as calm as she could manage. The weight surprised her as Terran released it into her grip. The metal was cool to the touch and free from any markings. She tested the balance in her hand and found it was slightly heavier at one end. Internal workings, but for what purpose? The commander pursed her rosy lips, clearly surprised, and considered Emilia and Terran. "Would one of your other overseers mind holding the rod for me?" Hayden reached for the rod, and Emilia instinctively tried to pull the device out of his reach. He was too fast, and he pulled the metal from her grip before she had time to react. Almost instantly, blue energy crackled from the rod and coursed up Hayden's arms. He convulsed and dropped the offending piece of metal. Terran stepped to his side, helping him to his feet. Hayden blinked, dazed. Terran's expression turned to pure fury, and Emilia held back a shudder. If he had his strength, the commander would have no doubt paid for the move with her life. "What in the depths was that?" he snarled. Quinmark gave a shrug of mock sincerity. "We have fashioned the device to help us detect those who have a bond with the sky." A muscle twitched in Terran's cheek, and he glared daggers at the commander. "To attack one of the sky is to invite death." The commander let out an exaggerated huff. "A drastic measure, to be sure, but can you blame us? We cannot take the word of those who have already betrayed us." "Perhaps we can attend to matters rather than posturing?" Venier interjected. "Of course, Elder," the commander purred, gesturing toward the curtained door. Venier turned to Hayden and Merrill, fresh color filling her cheeks before entering the room. "Watch closely. If you are acted upon, level the camp. Leave no one alive." The two bowed their heads and brought fists to their chests. Emilia filed into the room behind the elder. Sentries dropped the heavy curtain behind them, closing off the panel-built room. "Good to see you still have fire left in you, Elder," Quinmark said, sitting in one of the low seats arranged in a semicircle. "Or I would wonder why we are not demanding the whole of the Mercurial." "The Mercurial would never bow to a roving people such as yours," Terran spat, choosing to stay standing. Venier sat and beckoned Emilia next to her. The commander stiffened, eyes flashing to Venier. "I suggest you tell your witnesses to watch their tongues among their betters, or they will lose them." Venier's eyes narrowed, her chin raised defiantly. "Says the trespasser on our lands. What right have you to demand such respect?" Emilia swallowed a swell of pride at the small woman's refusal to be cowed. A wicked smile curved the woman's lips. "I forgot you were unaware. These lands are now under the control of the Lord General Sarche, divinely appointed leader of the Tumultian clans. This meeting is to broker peace and settle the Mercurial's account."